Saha, the author of The Digital Choices, and you're listening to the Insurtech Story podcast, the platform to spread knowledge on insurance innovation, digital disruptions, and entrepreneurship. Our website, insurtechstory.com, and we are available on Spotify, Apple, and Google. Welcome to today's show, where we will discuss on the topic cyber protection for small businesses and Insurtech solution. And for now, I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Sam Kramer, who is the Vice President of Reinsurance at Corvus Insurance, that's based in Boston, United States. Corvus is reimagining commercial insurance for a digital world by making insurance smarter and policyholders safer. Corvus was founded in 2017 by a team of veteran entrepreneurs from the insurance and technology industries. Sam's focus at Corvus is on the cyber protection solution targeted towards small and micro sized businesses. Prior to joining Corvus, Sam spent most of his career in the insurance industry, including at insurers, reinsurers, and various insurance focused financial services and advisory roles. So, Sam, welcome on board, and I'm truly excited to have you for the show.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me on.
I would like to start by mentioning to all our listeners um, that small businesses are the number one target for cyber criminals, even though we tend to ignore the significance of this, with 60% of them closing within 6 months after an attack. Since February 2020, there has been a 600% increase in phishing. 67% of businesses have experienced an IoT security incident. In Canada, for example, nearly a quarter of all small businesses have fallen victim to a cyber attack since the pandemic began. Now, more than ever before, the small business sector is beginning to prioritize cybersecurity and cyber liability insurance to mitigate potential crippling financial risk, which is setting the stage for a major trend moving forward. The merging of cybersecurity technology and insurance to mitigate insurers' risk and provide the best overall coverage for small businesses. Also, to add here, as the risk and financial impact of cyber attacks continues to rise, every small business owner can take proactive steps to understand the potential threats and to protect company data and assets. Cyber risk is not just a problem for the IT department, it must be regarded as one of the most destructive sources of risk for a small and medium size or a micro size enterprises. With this, let me move on to discuss some of the pressing issues in the cyber solutions domain, particularly for small and micro sized businesses. So, Sam, in line with our podcast topic today, what do you mean by cyber protection and why is it important for small and micro sized enterprises?
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Yeah, cyber protection, like you mentioned, is critical for these small and micro-sized enterprises. But sometimes the word cyber, we misunderstand it a little bit. So let me explain in more detail. Uh, First of all, most of the cyber attacks that we hear about today involve a bad actor taking over a company's computer system, holding it ransom, demanding a large sum of money to enable the company to regain access to its systems and to its data. And we call this ransomware. Uh, I'm sure you've seen a lot of large ransomware events that have been publicized in the media lately. They're becoming quite common, and we've seen a number. You know, Colonial Pipeline was one of the more recent ones, but there have been a number this year and last year as well as in the past. Uh, now, when we think about cyber, we're not just talking about your computer systems. We're also talking about your data. And if you hold some sensitive data, that's actually valuable to a bad actor for following reasons. One is they can take that data and sell it on the dark web. They can monetize the data, or they also know that merely by gaining access to your sensitive data, you as a small business could be liable for hefty fines and penalties, and they may ask you to pay them some amount less than those fines or penalties just to regain access to the data. Uh, but but the risk to the business around a ransomware attack, or even more so than just paying the ransom and restoring the systems and regaining access. Um, First of all, a business may need to shut down if it's taken ransomware. Many businesses are so reliant on the computer systems today that they cannot serve their customers without access to their systems and their data. So if your company is your systems are taken ransomware, and you can't serve your customers, well, you actually have to shut down. You're still incurring a lot of costs, but you're getting no revenues in that time. It can be quite costly, and it can take a month or two for some of the more extreme claims to be rectified and access to be restored in complicated scenarios. Now, we mentioned if customer data was exfiltrated, there could be third-party liability as well as fines, but you may also have an obligation to provide things such as identity monitoring and other services to your customers to give them comfort that these bad actors won't be able to monetize or at least capitalize on the data and extort your customers down the road. But additionally, when your customers find out that their data has been exfiltrated or accessed, it's damaging to your reputation as a company. You might lose a lot of business, or certainly, like you mentioned, a lot of businesses close shortly after a ransomware attack. Now, data restoration is another significant cost. Even in instances where a ransom's paid, it's quite typical that all the data is not properly unencrypted. And so you need to engage experts to unencrypt the data, regain access to it, or maybe you have an extensive backup system, but you probably need some help with restoring the backups and getting your systems back up and running. And then lastly, because there are a myriad of potential liabilities, both regulatory as well as in the court systems or otherwise, you're going to need an attorney to help out and advise through the process, which can get costly as well. So those are some of the costs that these small businesses might face if they're taking ransomware. When we think of cyber protection, we think that it's more than just insuring the businesses from these losses. It's trying to find ways to reduce the incidence of a breach, whether it's ransomware or some other kind of malfeasance. These small businesses are exposed, and they're very much at risk, even the very small ones. Why is that? Well, the sad truth is that it's easy to identify vulnerable systems. Open doors, so to speak, are easily visible by a bad actor. They can scan a large number of IP assets and in a matter of seconds get back data that shows where the vulnerabilities are, and then they can figure out which of those vulnerabilities that they want to that they want to attack. So if you as a small business, if you have unpatched software, if you have out-of-date firmware, you have poorly secured ports, and there's a whole host of other security safeguards that could be in place. If they're not properly in place, it's easy for a bad actor to see those vulnerabilities and take advantage of you.
Right. You rightly mentioned on how exactly the functional element of SMEs would work with respect to the ransomware part. So SMEs in all aspect, they they have limited budget, they have limited resources, and with that in mind, understanding what's going on to best protect them before, during, and after a ransomware attack, it's something very crucial. And having known the restrictions, the limitations they have, uh, even more than a cyber defense, what's important is cyber resilience. So do you have any points to add to that?
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I mean, um, from a cyber resilience side, it can be challenging for the smaller businesses to put a cost-effective solution in place. Unfortunately, many of the solutions are geared towards the larger businesses. So if we look at cybersecurity, um, there are a lot of, the antivirus and security services do a great job of marketing their services, but many of them overmarket and they oversell what they're actually capable of. So a small business might get comfort that their antivirus solution is advanced and up to date and capable of defending against ransomware because when you go to that solution's webpage and you read about the product, they make those claims. But the reality is that most of them are not capable of providing the type of defense against ransomware and similar claims that the products state that they're able to do. So really, if a small business is not buying an enterprise focused solution, that they're probably not getting the right kind of protection. The enterprise, a good way to tell if you're getting it is, if you're paying a couple bucks a month for your solution, it's probably not the enterprise grade. It's important to have any solution in place, but really the effective ones against protecting against ransomware, they're a lot more expensive. They're geared towards enterprise-sized customers and those enterprise-sized budgets. On the insurance coverage side, uh, small businesses also have a challenge. There aren't too many carriers who are selling the lower limit policies that are more appropriate for a company with, under five or under $1 million in revenues. And why is that? A half million or $1 million policy, that could be close to the amount of coverage that they need. But a lot of these carriers set a floor to their pricing, and the floor is typically targeted at customers that are bigger, at least in the US, say, two, three, five, $7 million in revenues. So if you're a small business, you have $500,000 in revenue, you're going to be paying the same rate as someone potentially five times your size, and that can be quite expensive for an insurance product. And then, the other challenge facing small businesses is what happens if there is a ransomware event. If your building's on fire, you know to call the fire department, and if you suffer a break-in, you call the police. But most people don't know who to call if they turn on their computer and discover that their company has been taken over for ransomware. And that's another area where it's important to take the right steps to get the right defenses and the right mitigation in place to both minimize the costs and the damage done by the ransomware, but also get a hold of the situation, manage it, and bring it to a faster and less costly resolution.
Right. You mentioned about protection there. So, from your experience, can you touch upon some of the key cyber protection challenges that are faced by the small and micro-sized businesses, perhaps on a global scale?
Yeah, yeah, certainly. So, a lot of it, like I mentioned, has to do with cost. But beyond cost, there's, it's hard to be an expert or even, knowledgeable in the field to the point where it's useful. There is a significant lack of information out there around what is appropriate and what's not. It's made worse by some of these, services overselling their products and so giving a false sense of comfort. Um, and they also, these small businesses can have some complicated IT systems, particularly if a business owner has kind of cobbled together a few services and putting kind of operating on a shoestring budget, there could be a lot of risks that are in there that the business owner is not aware of. And that education, it's not a reading a website or an article. It's a significant number of hours of training and hands-on experience that's needed to understand how to make it work. So it's a real challenge for these small businesses where they don't want to spend significant sums of money on IT consultants, and they're too small to have their own IT department. Where do they get this understanding of, are they adequately protected, and how do they make sure that they do it in a cost effective way?
Right. Among many of the challenges that are faced by the SMEs, particularly for the cybersecurity part, uh, we increasingly come up, or rather witness situations wherein the data breaches are happening because of human error as well. Of course, perhaps mistakenly or in error. So that also leads to a lot of cybersecurity issues. Anything that you have come across, or any sort of solutions that you think SMEs can adopt to counter such challenges?
Yeah, that's a great point. And there's a good amount of data published on this topic where they look at what are the causes of the breaches, or what are the security lapses that resulted in the
Right.
breach. And when you go and look at the smaller businesses, you'll see most of the breaches are taking place because of some unpatched software error. It's either a port that's open that's unsecured, that should be secured, or it's some software that has a security flaw. There's a patch out there, but the business has not installed the patch, and so the flaw is still out there. And as I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, it's really easy for a bad actor to see that vulnerability, and very quickly. Um, but there are a lot of claims that are due to human error. It's mainly what you refer to as phishing, where a bad actor is going to send an email that looks legitimate, but when you click on a link or download the attachment, it actually installs some malicious software onto your network, and either takes a ransomware or enables them to steal funds or divert other assets for their own, for the bad actor's own benefit. About the phishing incidents is probably 30 to 50% of the unpatched software and the vulnerabilities incidents. So it's still significant. If you were able to uh, eliminate phishing and these security flaws in the software, you'd be a good step further ahead to protecting yourself against a hack. And probably one of the biggest challenges around the phishing and the human error side is software is not enough to do it. There are some solutions that help with this. Email security providers can do a lot of help to identify emails that are potentially malicious. There's email authentication tools that help to make sure that the sender is actually who they say they are, and provide some other um, uh, signals if it's a potentially malicious actor in there. But ultimately, it's going to come down to training. The best software in the world might not pick up every bad piece of malware out there, and so it's important that your employees get trained and that they understand what to look for, when to be suspicious of an email, and what to do if they are, if they do think they're being a target of a phishing attack. Fortunately, the training there are a number of solutions out there. If you were to do an internet search for small business security awareness training, you'll see tens to hundreds of potential vendors. Some of them are free, and they offer a limited free experience, and some of them require a paid subscription as well.
That's a great piece of advice there. I think it'd be very much helpful for the listeners, and I would certainly suggest them to take a note of this. Whoever is interested to get some sort of a basic foundation on how the cybersecurity issues would go through for any SMEs, and how the challenges can be countered accordingly. Sam, just moving on to the solution front a bit. Uh, can you state some of the traditional insurance solutions that SMEs use to protect themselves against cyber, and how you think these technologies would be improving these traditional solutions, or rather, can improve these traditional solutions coming ahead?
Yeah, so fortunately, the insurance market has provided a degree of cyber protection for many small businesses, at least in the US. I'm not as familiar with the global markets, and so I'll kind of limit my comments to the US market, but I imagine a lot of this is happening around the world as well. So what we find is the smaller businesses, they're not significant purchasers of what we call a standalone cyber insurance. So a lot of them do not have a policy that's only covering them for cyber insurance. However, they do all purchase other insurance. You know, the standard is called maybe a business owner's policy. If you're a doctor, you need a medical malpractice insurance policy. If you're a lawyer, you need a legal professional liability policy. Um, it's really common for these small business policies to include a small amount of cyber insurance. Maybe it's 50 or $100,000, but it's coverage that's specifically for a cyber event. And one of the big benefits of these skinny coverages is that if the business does suffer a ransomware event, they actually have a person to call. These insurers have experienced breach response teams that react and help the business through the ransomware event. They have some limit to pay for the attorneys, to pay for data restoration. You know, if it's you know, potentially if they feel like they need to pay a ransom, there might be some limit to pay the ransom as well. But they certainly get all the tools that the insurer has available for their larger clients, and those are dedicated for the smaller business. And these solutions do a good job of providing a more affordable coverage for the the businesses, the small businesses, and most of the insurers do a good job with handling the breach response efforts. But the solutions, they're reactive. They don't do much to protect the business from an adverse event. They really wait until a breach has occurred and then they step in. Now, they don't get me wrong; these insurers are providing high quality resources, you know, risk management materials, other materials on how to better secure yourself. Maybe they offer some discounts on some vendors, some security vendors as well. But the sad reality is that these resources, they're kind of made available to policyholders. They're not really accessed that much. And so while the resources can be useful, we don't see a big impact from them just because the small businesses either don't know or they don't have the time to go and you know, access them and take them into account. If we think about what's a, so to speak, insurtech solution, you know, at Corvus, we're bringing technology into this embedded cyber solution, and we call it smart cyber reinsurance. So our solution, it enables any insurance carrier to provide their policyholders with that small amount of cyber coverage. They don't need to retain any financial exposure to the coverage. So they pay a premium on behalf of their policyholder, and if there's a claim, a Corvus insurer comes and pays that claim, not the carrier who actually issued the policy. You know, Corvus, we also have a highly experienced breach response team, so it's going to help every claim and it's going to help minimize the damage to any business that's suffering a cyber event. Where we differ is that we proactively help our insureds with their cybersecurity. So we start by looking at the same data as a bad actor would. We developed a scan which takes a look at a company's IT assets, and we try to come as close as possible to what we think bad actors are looking for. So if a bad actor can see an open port, we can see it too. If they can see an out-of-date piece of software, we're picking it up as well. And when we pick it up, we are communicating the findings to the insured. We are helping them understand why it's a problem, help them understand how to fix it, and then even in some cases helping them fix it. So our insureds, they get a detailed report on their specific cybersecurity hardness. We're not out there saying, hey, train your employees. We're saying, IP address 123.456 has the following vulnerabilities, and we think that, in the following order of criticality, you should address them. If we discover something that is really a critical vulnerability, the most common one is referred to as OpenRDP, or Open Remote Desktop Protocol ports. We're going to notify them specifically. We're going to be much more in their face about it, and really let them know this is something they really need to get their hands around. If a new threat emerges, so we've seen this year, there's been well publicized SolarWinds hack, for example. Well, we can actually pick up which software versions the insureds are using, and if we pick up one of the versions that was impacted by the SolarWinds hack, well, then we notify that insured as well, and help them resolve the situation, make sure that they don't have bad actors sitting in their system already. And we do that regularly. If tomorrow we learn of a new major threat, we're going to look at everybody again, and the ones who we think are at risk, we're going to work with them to fix it. And we know that businesses are always changing their systems, right? They're either installing things or something goes out of date mid-year. So we're not just scanning them once, we're looking at them on a regular basis. And our smart cyber reinsurance solution, we also include a host of other technology and services with it. But in my opinion, these risk management reports, these alerts, and the monitoring are the most important to the cyber protection for the insureds in our solution.
Right. Speaking on solution, we must also understand that there is no magic formula towards countering cyber threats, right? Um, but however, what would be your advice for the industry people on how best they can protect their small businesses from possible cyber attacks, leveraging the benefit of technology?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there are a lot of solutions out there and steps that people can take. Some of it leverage technology, others don't. Um, for starters, there are a number of items that they don't have a monetary cost. They might take up a decent amount of time, but there's no monetary cost for these. So what are some of the free items? One is, it's really important that you as an owner understand your business's IT assets. If you want to know all of the software and hardware that your business is using, so that if you do need a patch, if you do have some sort of update needed, you're aware of where it is. You can either do it yourself or communicate to an IT expert who's helping you what you have, and they can make sure to give you the proper fulsome solution. Another free item is you can enable email authentication. There are a lot of services out there that provide this for free. It can be complicated to set up, but there typically is not a cost for running it. Another important step is keeping all hardware and software updated with any patches. So make sure all your routers are up to date with the most recent firmware. Your software is set to automatically update as updates come through. Kind of goes hand in hand with understanding your IT assets. If you know an asset's there, you want to make sure that it's set to update itself. And leads into the next point as well, which is you should really be using complex passwords for access to any system or piece of hardware. Your router may have shipped with a default access of username admin and password of password, and every bad actor knows that. And so if they can't necessarily see what your username and password are from the outside. If they see you have a router that ships with this as a default, they can try admin and password and see if that gives them access to it. Just by using a complex password, you're going to make their jobs harder. It's also important to train your employees in security awareness. We talked about that before. I'm not an expert in all the myriad of training solutions. There are a lot of them, but I have worked with a company called Wiser, who offers a really high quality free solution to small businesses. And then going beyond the free solutions, I mean, if you were to take all those steps there, you'd certainly be a step further down the line towards having really solid cyber protection. But there's still a couple of other actions that should be taken, and these unfortunately do have a cost, but they're also quite effective. Um, First is if you offer remote access to your systems, you want to ensure that multi-factor authentication is enabled. So that means anytime one of your employees or you try to log into your system, you're going to enter your username and password, and hopefully it's a complex password. But after you successfully enter the password, you're going to get another notification. Maybe it's a SMS to your cell phone. Maybe you have an authenticator app. Maybe it sends you an email with a code, and you're going to have to enter that unique code, which is going to change every time you log in. And that's important because if somebody does manage to hack your password, either they know it or they have software that can what we call brute force it, guess every possible password combination until they're right. This multi-factor authentication prevents them from gaining access to your system. Another important step to take is to regularly back up your data and ensure one backup is kept offline. Now, it's important to remember something like plugging in a USB drive into your computer each night and backing it up. That is not an effective solution, unfortunately. If you get taken ransomware, it'll be really hard to restore your systems. Just from that, it's going to take a long time, cost a lot of money to restore from a USB or a similar type of backup. The backups are an area where a vendor solution makes sense. If you have sensitive customer data, if you have credit card numbers, other uniquely identifying information, you also want to encrypt that data that's backed up so that if a bad actor is able to penetrate your system and access the data is no good to them. They don't know what they're looking at. Maybe you can't access it, but it's of no value to them. And that's a helpful point as well in limiting the fallout and the cost of a ransomware claim. Another item where you should be spending money is on your antivirus software. I did mention before some of these oversell themselves, but it is an important component to have in the whole chain of security. And if you have a lot of sensitive data, you should really consider an enterprise version of antivirus because these enterprise versions are going to provide the additional services that will either repel or shut down ransomware attacks before they become too widespread. And lastly, kind of the newer solution, which is showing a lot of promise as well, is called endpoint detection and response, or EDR. And this is really what a lot of these antivirus software companies claim they can do, but don't necessarily do a good job with it. And this is software which will be monitoring your systems. If they pick up something that looks like ransomware, they're going to shut it down. They're going to send notices. There's going to be action that's taken, whether it's usually it's by software, and it's usually designed to kind of outsmart the ransomware software as well, or can take other action as well. And then a lot of these also include a monitoring service with it. So if there is an alarm that, hey, there's a piece of malware installed, you as a business owner aren't left to try to figure out what to do. You actually have a team of IT security experts that are looking at it. So if you were to do all of that, you train your employees, all of your software and hardware is up to date. You have complex passwords, you have multi-factor authentication, you have a good backup solution in place, you have EDR in place. You're significantly further along from stopping a bad actor breaking into your system and ultimately taking it ransomware and disrupting your business.
No, absolutely. Cybersecurity is important for every companies, irrespective of their sizes. But many small businesses don't think that they're at risk, and simply because of the size of their company. But unfortunately, that simply isn't true. Just to quote a data, 71% approximately of the cyber attacks occur at businesses that has fewer than 100 employees. So they can understand, how crucial and how intense it is to actually take the journey to make their foundation stronger towards implementing a cyber security strategy. So I think that's very vital for the SME sector all over the globe. And just to summarize on how they can best protect their businesses, as per you have rightly pointed, is understanding the emerging trends and the evolving risk, because knowledge is crucial. There is no substitute for knowledge. So unless you understand what is it, there is no way that you can actually try and take a step ahead. And of course, develop a security policy. Keep the hardware, software, and any other IT parts, safeguard them, make it up to date, as you said, up on the antivirus part and others. And of course, educate their employees, which is one of the major part towards a cyber solution. So there was some great thoughts shared there, Sam, and thank you very much. It was indeed a fantastic discussion, and thank you for sharing your thoughts there. And it was truly a delight to have you as our guest.
And thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed joining you on the show.
And lastly, to wrap this up, thank you for listening and see you at our next episode. Take care and stay safe. Goodbye for now.